Thank you. Thank you, Brother Rick, and thank you, Pastor Karen. And thank you all of you who come in this evening. This is session 11. Wow. Praise be to God. Let me share screen with you. Spiritual Leadership Session 11. And tonight we are going to discuss about conflict management for servant leaders. And we know that conflict is inevitable in any place. But we want to look at how this kind of a conflict, where it first started. It first started in heaven. Then war broke out in heaven. Michael and his angel fought against the dragon, and the dragon and his angel fought back. So here, Revelation kind of took us back to the time of creation, and just before creation, you find that there was a conflict in heaven, and so the war broke out in heaven. And then Lucifer was the archangel, and he became proud, and he wanted to rise above God, and so that he was cast down. So the Bible says that he was not strong enough, and they lost their place in heaven. The great dragon was hurled down, that ancient serpent called the devil or Satan, who leads the whole world astray. He was hurled to the earth and his angels with him. And so the Bible also indicated that he took about 1/3 of heaven's angels with him. And so when they came down to earth, the earth was actually formed. And then if you do read the first book of the Bible and the first verse, it says that the earth was formless, which means that something had happened, because God never created anything that's formless, but something happened. And so we believe that Genesis chapter 1, verse 1 and verse 2, there is that gap whereby, where there is a recreation of the heaven and the earth. All right, let's go on. So conflict is a biblical reality. So you know that after Adam and Eve, they sinned against God and they were being expelled out of the Garden of Eden. Then they had children, and of course the story of Cain and Abel, how Cain killed Abel. And then we have story of Hagar and Sarah, and how there was a dispute because of the son. And then Isaac and Esau, and then you'll find Leah and Rachel, Joseph and his brothers, and then the Hebrews and the Egyptian, and the Hebrews and the Canaanites. Then the Israels and the Canaanites, which is the Hebrew and the Canaanites. And then David and Goliath, Saul and David, Elijah and Jezebel, Jesus and the religious leaders. Now, this is of interest to us because if you were to read the Bible, how Jesus would handle the Pharisees. He was open to those Pharisees who were serious about the kingdom of God, like Nicodemus, and he would spend time with them. But to those who rejected him, he would not spend the time with them, but he rather spent time with those who were receptive to the gospel. And so that also gives us some indication is that we go to a place where we are accepted, whereby people are willing to listen to the gospel, instead of trying to go to a place whereby there's total rejection. There was a missionary, actually, he went to Cairo, and that was way back, I think, in the 1930s, when he went into Cairo, this American man. He claimed to be a missionary. He went to Cairo, and then he went on the street and began to proclaim the gospel. But what he did was that he was not trained, and so he began to derail and make fun of Islam. And of course, when he began to compare Muhammad with Jesus, and he used some very tough words against that religion, and so he was promptly killed on the street of Cairo. So what we say is that if you want to reach people like this, you have to be very discreet, and you cannot go do it like openly like this. Now, then Judaism and Christianity, then between the apostle and the Sanhedrin, which means the rulers of the Jews, and then between Paul and Barnabas, between the apostles. So you find that this conflict is also found in the Bible. And so we need to understand how to manage conflict. Now you find that we do not talk about resolution or trying to solve conflict, but rather try to manage it. Because certain conflict you cannot solve. Okay, like between the conflict between Jesus and the Pharisees, and ultimately the end result was that the Pharisees and the religious leaders, they came against Jesus, and then they put him on the cross. So we say conflicts are inevitable as long as there are situations where people have to deal with people, there will be conflicts. Whether you are in the home or whether you are in the office, you will find conflicts. So when there are decisions to be made, deadlines to be met, standard to be upheld, there will be conflicts. Now in our church, basically, our conflict arises mainly from standard being held, that we have a very high standard and we want everything to be done well. It's not that we are perfectionists, it's just that we want it to be done appropriately. For example, years ago in my church, when I pioneered a church, and that church grew to a very large church, about 2,000 members in the mother church, and with 16 branches. Now, how did we do that? Is that because we maintain a very high standard of excellence. Let me just quote one simple example. We had a new clerk who first joined our church, and then she was asked to photocopy some forms. And when she brought the forms to me, and I discovered that she had not double-checked. And so the form was photocopied slanted. So all the text was slanted. And so I give instruction to recopy and make sure that she double-checked and that all the text will be straight. And she kind of complained and said, but Pastor, people can still read and we can still use them. But what she didn't realize was that this sloppiness would reflect upon the competence of the church. Imagine if you cannot do small things well, how are you going to do great things for the Lord? And therefore we recopied, and then we used those paper. We didn't throw them away. We used them as paper for our meeting. The back of the paper we used to write notes and so on and so forth. What I'm saying here is that we have to have a particular standard, but some people don't, they didn't like our standard, they like sloppiness, and so they did not join us, or they joined us for a short time and they couldn't stand us, and so they left. And in fact, on in our office, we have a signboard that says check, double check, triple check, because I believe myself is that whatever that we do for Jesus, we must do to the very best of our abilities. Now, what about something for myself? Now, if it's something for myself, no big deal, like some food I eat or whatever. If I cook something, I don't have to have a gourmet meal, something simple will be fine. But for Jesus, I want it to be beautiful. So that causes conflict, all right? And people might disagree. So where do you expect conflicts? You have home, workplace, church, social activities, sports and recreation. And then I say at your own places, because you most probably have 1,001 other places whereby you have conflict. Now, conflicts are often misunderstood here. What I'm trying to say is that many believers consider conflicts to be unspiritual. They go into this avoidant mode, right? Avoidant. Later on, you shall learn what is this avoiding mode here. So if we ignore it, soon it will go away. Or some says that God will take care of the problem. But it's not going to be so, yeah? So all believers should be nice and get along well no matter what. Now, how we wish that would be true, that everybody can get along well. But if you are going to give them freedom of speech and also freedom of thoughts, then what is going to happen is that people definitely will have their own ideas, and ideas, they do clash. Now let's talk about the benefits of conflict first so that we put ourselves in the positive note. Yeah. Managing conflict is quicker and more efficient than letting conflict fester, which means that we avoid. And then conflict foster an awareness that problem exists. When you encounter a conflict, you know that there must be some kind of a discrepancies or problems in your organization, whether in your home, in your family, or in your office, or in the church. Discussing conflicting views can lead to better solution. Now, conflicting view might open up your eyes so that you can see another point of view. Oftentimes, we are very quote unquote narrow-minded and tunnel vision. We only see our own view, and that I confess that sometimes I'm very focused and I just couldn't see the view of others until some kind soul, would enter into a conflict and say, Pastor, I disagree with you. And then I want to know why they disagree with me. And to my horror, that wow, they actually got far greater, far better ideas than what I did. So it is always good to humble so that you can listen to people and then receive new ideas. So conflict requires creativity to find the best outcomes, especially when we are dealing with different characters and personalities. And then you find that you really need a lot of wisdom and also creativity and to find the best solution to the problem. And conflict raises awareness of what is important to individual because sometimes we cannot see the other side of the coin. We cannot see the other side of the story. And then when we hear the individual out, then you find that we would begin to understand that this problem may not be able to be just solved from our point of view, but we have to consider each individual. Now, in our church, we consider individuals to be very important. Now, events and tasks, they may not be as important as individual, but yet tasks still got to be done. And so we strike a balance between people orientation and task orientation. So managing conflicts appropriately help build self-esteem. Now, when we work together as a group and then we collaborate and we discuss about the problem, and then you find that each person involved would have this, enhancement of their self-esteem. And then managing conflict well is a sign of maturity. And it also helps young believers who are now leaders to mature and see how we handle situations that might be very tough. Conflicts are, of course, very stressful. The word is challenging, but it's very exciting, yeah? And conflict encourage people to grow and also create opportunities for new things to happen. Now, what's the damages of conflict? A conflict can injure feelings, and I have injured some people's feeling, and quite a number of them. And I think also that some of these people injured my feeling too. But remember that, we have this handing over prayer, whereby when the feelings are hurt, then you need to hand over to the Lord. Conflict can delay the work in progress, and conflict can result in faction developing, which means to say that Here is one group that will say, I follow after Paul. Another group say, I follow after Apollos. Another group is even greater still, say, I follow after Jesus. And so because of this conflict, so we have to be very careful in how we manage conflict. So let's find out what is conflict. Of course, we know disagreement between people, a perceived difference, incompatibility, or violation of a shared agreement. For example, we have an agreement and there might be some misunderstanding and that they make assumption. I remember at one time when I was the general manager of a supermarket, and then there was this partner who came in and he was telling the other partner that, that their relationship would be arm length, right? So later on, they had a big fight and big quarrel was because what? Because that they said that one partner said arm length means that you allow me to run the supermarket and you do not disturb me. You are not concerned about the detail. I will run it and I will send you a monthly report. But the other partner said arm length, which means that I'm close to you. Therefore, I need I need to know everything. And so they had a big fight, yeah, because of the word arm-length. So they have different meaning to that word. So next time you have to, look at the etymology of the word and make sure that the word that you use, both of you agree that is of the same meaning. So there might be a clash of ideas or culture or personalities. I also had one experience whereby one of my managers was from India, and then I got another manager from Cambodia. And so these two managers couldn't get along because they were of a different culture. And so there was a clash of culture and, of course, the personalities. So the Indian manager considered himself to be more educated and therefore he would be more superior. Whereas the Cambodian manager said that he was fairer and the Indian was darker and therefore fairer people would be of a higher caste. So there was a big fight again. Yeah. So parties with opposing interests, ideas, perception, assumptions, and values will have conflict. So when you are called to manage conflict, for example, you are a person of authority, you are a general manager, or you are a pastor, or you are a teacher, or you are a principal, or you are a doctor, or that you have certain degree of authority and you have to manage an organization, then you really need a lot of wisdom. You need to find out, what are the sources of this conflict. It may not be one source, right? So I say, what are the sources? So what causes conflict? So very seldom does one reason trigger a conflict, okay? A conflict usually becomes open when there are a series of latent conflicts, which means that it built up. It built up in a person's life. And like, for example, this girl was very furious and she punched through the document. This is a very, very interesting illustration, this picture here. Now, what are those latent conflicts that we are talking about? It can be one slight misunderstanding and it's being buried, and then another slight misunderstanding and is being hidden under the carpet, and so on and so forth. And then one day, that person couldn't take it anymore. It would become a volcano, and the person would just explode. So a single event may trigger an open conflict, and there are multiple causes. I think those of you who are married, you know what I'm talking about. Is that if communication is very poor in the family between the couple, then you find that it will be just one person The Cantonese word is yan, yan. so, so the person is like, exercising self-control, tolerating, and then until one day the person may not be able to take it anymore, and then explosion and open conflict. So let's talk about conflict stages. We want to talk about latent conflict. If you can solve the latent conflict earlier, that'd be great. And like I said here, is that the willingness to communicate, the willingness to discuss, and that the best thing is that the opposing side also understand that communication is the best way to go, and that we shouldn't shut each other down. We have counseled married people, and when they start to have latent conflict, they try to cover up, and some of them try to bring it up, and then the other partner would say, "Shut up," and then it just shut down, and then it goes to become conflict emergent, which means that it is beginning to show. And then after that, it starts to escalate, and you can see Cold War, or you can see nasty words being used, sarcasm being used, And so all these are part and parcel of the escalation of conflict. So if you find that in your home that you are having this problem here, then it's best to quickly talk with your spouse. In the office, if you find this to be there, that in between staff, they are being very sarcastic and always pick on one another and complain against each other, then you know that this is conflict escalation. There will be problem in your office. And in the church is the same way. Then there will come to this peak there. You can see this is a bell curve here. You come to the stalemate whereby, they no longer can communicate, and that if they were to communicate, it will be, they won't be listening to one another. They will just be verbally abusing each other. All right. So this is the hurting stage here. And then until they come to their senses, and of course, maybe one of the partners begin to pray, and there will be the desire to negotiate. Now, if the stalemate part is not solved, the curve will not come down, and then it might just stay up there until the couple get a divorce, or the company, the employees, they would leave the company, or in the church, members will leave the church because they have been hurt. So de-escalation can only happen when we negotiate, that when we have communication. And then you bring down here is that in the negotiation, there will be the dispute being brought up and to be settled. And that's good. Means that you come to an agreement, and then after that, post-conflict, and then peace building, and then so there will be peace in the family, peace in the office, or peace in the church. Now, common reasons of conflict is, number one, lack of the understanding of the defined goals. Now, you know that we all establish goals, like I establish goals for the church, and it's up to the people who work with me, the volunteers and also the pastors, to understand those goals. And if those goals are not well defined, then they have to come to me and to ask for more explanation. But oftentimes people will just, say, this is your goal. And so they have no ownership of the goal. And then when there is a demand for that goals to be achieved, and then you find that they become detached or become upset because, they are not part of their goals. Then you say, what about family? Yes, family, you also have goals. For example, if you are saving money for your children's education, and then that's the goal, right? And then one of the spouse, maybe the husband would take the money and spend it and you buy a sport car, and that will cause conflict, right? And or you have various goals, like every year you need to go to church camp, and church camp has become the is the habit of the family, the tradition, and so you want to have church camp. But then suddenly the wife said, no, we don't want to have church camp, and then conflict again. So, and then the other one is diverse personal value. And this personal value can be different for individual. For example, you have your personal value in terms of your social ethics. So you are very, very careful when you go out there, and then you make sure that you do not litter. When you use your tissue, and then you will put into your bag or into the pocket until you find a dustbin to throw. But maybe your spouse or your friend or your partner or your teammate may not have the same value. And so you just throw things all over the street, and then you would have a bad impression about him. He might be very highly educated and very proficient, very effective, but you already have this bad impression about him. And so next time when you talk to him, you are going to kind of talk down to him. And so that can also create conflict. And the lack of trust that leads to lack of cooperation. Like I said here, one thing in the church is that instead of trying to deal with so many of the conflict, because everybody will have his or her own idea, I advocate that all the leaders, we build up trust, meaning that we trust one another. We trust that we have no intention to do evil to each other. But sometimes some people are not that way. They will come to the church, and because they had some bad experiences in the past, and so they are quite paranoid, you know. And so whatever that the church would do something, and then they would have uh, kind of a read into the intention and say that this church have ulterior motive, and so on and so forth. And so that caused the lack of trust, and so they do not cooperate. So when the church say that, all right, you have to go through the 4 kingdom books, they refuse. You have to join prayer meeting to practice, the the discipline, they refuse. You have to read your Bible, they refuse. Why? Because lack of trust. And then competition of scarce resources. Now, recently we had this in our church, and the Chinese ministry, they needed to use the room. We had this one room that they had always been using. That's before the MCO, right? Before the COVID-19, they were using it. But then after that, they had gone on to Zoom, and so they were a bit slow in coming back to use that room, and that room was given to the teenagers. So the youth group, they are now actually using that room, and the youth group are much bigger than the Chinese church right now. And so they wanted to use that room. And so you see, we only have one room that they can really use. And so I offered the pantry. And thank God was that the Chinese pastor, Pastor Abraham, he agreed, that very godly man. He said, yes, we will use the pantry. And so now what I'm doing is I'm giving instruction to get the projector fixed in the pantry, means to hang them up, to hang up the projector, and so that they will be convenient to use the pantry. And the pantry is a very nice place. But for that smaller group, they can use the pantry. So there's a competition of scarce resources. And if it's not being managed well, then there will be conflict. All right. Pastor Abraham can definitely come and tell me and say, hey, this was our room, and then he could demand it back. But because now the teenagers are more than the Chinese church, and therefore he willingly said, okay, we will use the pantry. Now, how about unclear roles, unclear job description? Especially in the church, you find that when volunteers come in, then when they start to help out, we seldom give them job description. We are just making assumption. We expect that the leaders of the department would take care of that. And so, for example, our dear Pastor Kang, he is in charge of the welcome team. And so we don't really have a manual, for the ushers, even though I have it. I actually have the whole thing. But it's not our habit to give those manuals to any new people who would come in. So what is happening here is that the job is being done called on-the-job training. So Pastor Kang would lead them by the hand and say, okay, this is what you do when people come in, you smile at them and so on and so forth. And so he has his procedure lined up. And so very simply, verbally, he would give instruction. Now, let's say if he doesn't do that, then the new ushers will be confused and he doesn't know what he should do, right? And so that would be called unclear job description and can cause conflict. Conflict, which means that the new usher may offend some of the guests who turned up. And so there might be conflict, or the new usher may not be doing what is expected of him. And so when there are certain expectations, there might be conflict, right? So there's always the failure in communication. I discovered that to be true. And so I'm trying to communicate more. I'm trying to, be a better leader by asking more questions and listening more. All right. The next one is the personality conflict, and this one is just like some people just can't like some people. Maybe this person happened to have the face that looked like the principal who used to cane him. So you say, every time I look at that face, I'll be very upset, And so in Chinese, he say, 一见你就讨厌. So he say, okay, so here is this pastor who got a face like his principal. He just doesn't like the pastor. And most probably soon he will change church. So results of conflict will be what? Stress, quarrels, complaint. And then avoidance will be absenteeism, okay, staff turnover, and then loss of church members, general unhappiness in the environment, the atmosphere is that of tension. There's reduced motivation, nobody wants to serve anymore, and reduced productivity. So that's the result of conflict. The type of conflicts, we have the task conflict, the relational conflict, and process conflict. So once you understand the type of conflict, you are also able to zero in and be able to solve it so that you're not running all over the place and, like they use that term, barking up the wrong tree. For example, people are having relational conflict, and then you are trying to attack the problem by attacking the process conflict. All right. And so it can be a problem. So what is task? Task conflict is basically the division of labor, allocation of resources, then managing expectation. Okay. But there is one thing here is the fourth one is called interpretation of facts. Different people may have different understandings of the facts surrounding their job, which can lead them to perform tasks differently and create task conflict. So like I talked about the ushers, they may not know how to be an usher. And like in our church, there is a distinction between ushers and greeters. And so they're going to say, am I a greeter or am I an usher? All right. The usher would be expected to take offering and so on. And greeters will be just making sure that the visitors, when they come, right, they are being welcomed. And then later on, that after the church, they will be introduced to 7 of our people, which means that when a guest comes into our church, the greeters must bring the person to meet 7 people from the church. Why? It's because when the guest will come back again, and if the greeter is not around, at least the guest will recognize 7 others. And every week the guest will come back and the guest will be able to intermingle and then get to know more people. So now, whether the greeters are doing this or not, you see, I have to depend very much upon the leaders, the leader of the greeters, to make sure that they are doing it. Sometimes I notice that they are not doing it. And so then I have to approach the leader and say, how come they are not doing it? Now, relational conflict has to do with value conflict. You have different values. Like now you find that there are people who accept lesbianism and homosexuality and all that. Okay. And then imagine you have people of different value. Then you have people who are Christian and people who are Muslim. So religion can play a part. Or politics, you look at the picture and some from UMNO, some from all the other opposition parties. And so if they are supporters of different parties, then they can enter into a conflict. And also different ethics. And there might be some social ethics that are acceptable to you, but may not be acceptable to others. And social norms, all right? Like for example, when I was pastoring in America, every Sunday, all my members would come and they will hug me, every one of them, because I'll be standing by the door and then they will all hug me, and all of them much taller and much bigger and much, really fat people, and they will bury me into their chest, and I could hardly breathe. But that's the culture, all right? That's the culture. And so at first I wasn't used to that. I was thinking, wow, this is, but because my language of love is also touch, yeah? And apart from, you see, my language of love is the word of encouragement. That's number one. The second one is touch. And so in America, for me, it will be very great because I can touch, I can hug them, even I can put my hand on the elbow of a lady, even when I talk to her. But that is not because I'm lecherous. It's simply because that's my language, means that I care, and I'm talking to you, and I make it's a connection. But when I come back to Asia, I can't do that. Because down here is that if I put my hand or even touch the shoulder, and the lady will say that this pastor is lecherous, hams up lower, right? So you can see the social norms are different. So you have to make some adjustment, yeah? And then behaviors, attitude, all these are what we know as relational conflict. You don't like certain behavior and you don't like certain attitude. Now, what is process conflict? Process conflict is disagreement over the procedure and the method used, all right? So we have to complete a task, and then it's almost like how you scratch your ear, you can scratch it this way, or you can put it the other way and scratch this way, So of course, we want to find the best way to do things. So when procedures, policies, and the strategies clash, the conflict begins. So can you understand? So people from different countries would do things differently. And I think Pastor Kang, who is working with the people from other countries, who is working in his building project, he would be the one able to tell you that sometimes their method will be different. Now, one time when I was in Cambodia, we had a maid. I had a maid in the house, and that she would come in the morning and would leave in the evening after she cooked the food. The first day she came to my house, and then I asked her to clean the house. And to the horror of horror, I saw that she took the broom that she swept the floor to sweep the table. Now, in Singapore, we use a cloth to clean the table. The broom would be only for the floor. But in Cambodia, they sweep the floor and they sweep the table. And that was like, whoa. But that's how different culture, how they have all their different ways of doing things. And so there's not right or wrong. It's just that there are different ways of doing things. Yeah. For example, another case was that I learned there was a Chinese boy who just went to America, and so he was learning English, and so he was, he was asked a question because he's going to learn the word above, on top and below. Okay, so the question would be that, is the cup above and the saucer below, or the saucer above and the cup below? The Chinese boy said saucer above and cup below, right? And so he got it wrong. But he argued and he said that no, in China, we put the saucer above, because when we put hot tea in, then we take this saucer and we cover up, so the saucer is above. Then the teacher said, oh, okay, then you got it right. So she understood that it was a culture. He came from that culture whereby the saucer is put above. So there's no right or wrong. But sometimes we tend to say that our ways would be right because we have been brought up that way. So the process conflict can become quite tedious if we don't understand, and that we don't seek to understand which culture the other person is coming from. Now let's talk about dysfunctional conflict. Now there are functional conflicts that are positive, and dysfunctional conflicts are not positive. This is a conflict that interrupts the working environment because it is just going round and round and going nowhere, right? It's going to just, it can be a personality conflict. I just don't like the way you look, and so just keep arguing. It prevents individual from reaching positive results. It is negative in its entirety and destroy relationship. A conflict that usually arises out of egos of the parties concerned. So it is not the issue, right? It's not the problem. It's not that they cannot work together. It's just that they don't like each other, or they think that I should not be working with you. You are below me and you are not on par with me, and therefore I cannot work with you. And I have discovered this in Cambodia when we were running all the businesses. I was running supermarket and 3 restaurants. And sometimes you find that Cambodians from different provinces would have disagreement. The North Cambodian and the South, they will have disagreement because you're from the North, I'm from the South. And so this kind of the dysfunctional conflict can really handicap the business. So the issue may be the result of competing ambition, unmanaged stress, and even burnout. Especially when a person is burnt out, an employee is burnt out, or somebody is burnt out, we ask the person to take a rest. And that the person should not make decisions during burnout. Now we talk about functional conflict. Functional conflict is a constructive and definitely beneficial encounter. And it helps us to understand that there are cracks and fissure in the team. But everybody is like willing to work together and to mend the cracks and to fill in the fissure so that the team will be able to function efficiently and effectively. So as all parties are matured spiritually, They can evaluate the conflict objectively. And so these are the people who are able to see issue by issue, and they are not engaged in this personality conflict. So a less matured group will tend to get engaged in this personality disagreement. So there will be understanding, there will be repentance, there will be restoration of trust and reconciliation. And so what you see in that picture is an actual reconciliation of a village, two village elders who had disagreement, and then now they hug each other in reconciliation. So functional, the challenges, the parties involved to strive harder for the success of the team. So it motivates you to work more diligently and efficiently. And it encourages them to improve their individual task performance. So we want to make sure that in the church or in the family and also in your office, that majority of your conflict would be functional one, but not the dysfunctional one that ultimately would tear the church apart, would tear the family apart, and would tear your office apart. So what is conflict management? It's a process of working through opposing views to reach a shared goal or a mutual purpose, which means to say that there might be certain things that you may not fully agree, but that you are willing to sacrifice in order to have this shared goal and mutual purpose. At one time, there was a brother who was in our church board, and that now the 11 of us had already agreed in the board voting that we would support the mission work in India. And because it's going to take a sizable amount of money to support, because we were planting churches in India, and every church would cost us 5,000 Singapore dollars. And so we wanted to plant as many as possible, and so we focused on India. But that brother had another idea because he got a friend in Indonesia. And so he wanted us to swing the mission fund to Indonesia. And he had this personal interest. But throughout the discussion, he refused to back down. And ultimately, he left the board. But because he was so adamant of the fact that he wanted the money to go to Indonesia, whereas majority, see, there were 12 of us, right? So majority wanted to send to India. So sometimes, conflict management may not be a conflict resolution, whereby it can be solved. And then when the person is very stubborn, then he will part way. So by engaging in effective conflict resolution, all involved may recognize the differences and shared circumstances. Right? You understand where we have differences, and then what are the things that we have in common. And in the process, we have to be Christ-like. Yeah. And in our communication, we do not attack the person. We attack the issue, we attack the problem, but we don't attack the people. And so that built up, that should be like your communication skill would be much better. Imagine when you just start off and then you say, you all are always like that. You are always like that. Then that would create, tension. You never summarize everything and say that that person is always like that. All right. So learn to work congruously to create an ideal solution to the conflict at hand. So that's conflict management. Now, Christian conflict management. Now, Christian conflict management is to identify and to handle the conflict in a sensible, fair and efficient and godly manner. Okay? So that is what we are saying, is that God is in the picture. And because we are godly people and we are children of God, therefore we have to listen to the Holy Spirit and how he wants us to handle it. For example, in a family, I always say that man should start off by treating the wife with 100-0, which means 100% I must make my wife happy. And 0% I expect my wife to make me happy. Right? Now, some people don't agree. Some people say it must be 50-50. But let me explain is that when Christ, when he came, 100% he blessed us. 100% he died on the cross for us. 100% he gave us his gift. 100% he did everything for us. There is really nothing we can give him, all right, except our life. And our life, and as you know, they are broken lives. So same thing here is that from us men, we have to be like Christ. So Christian conflict management basically is that you need to put on Christ. You need to behave like Christ. In the process, God is glorified and the relationship with the conflicted parties is enhanced. Now we are talking about people who walk on the same path. People who walk with Jesus, then you find that they were first conflicted, and then when they walk with Jesus, then their relationship with God is greatly enhanced. Their relationship with the apostles and with the rest of the church greatly enhanced. But the opposition, people like the Pharisees and people like the rulers of the temple and the political leaders, like those who are kings and all that, they didn't like the Christians. In fact, they were the one later on would persecute the Christian and kill many of them. So we are not talking about managing conflict with them. We are talking about managing conflict within the team that we are working with, within the people that we have to live with, and that there is a common goal and there is a common purpose. So any unresolved problems should not produce further anxiety or generate further animosity. So what we are saying here is that when it's solved, it should be solved. But once the unresolved problem, right, means a certain thing can't be solved, even if it is being placed right there, it should not affect our relationship with one another. Is that we are far greater, our relationship is far greater than the problem. But some people, they can't. Once they have that problem and they put that problem, they personalize that problem and they put that problem upon you, or, what we are saying is that they fix the blame. Instead of fixing the problem, they fix the blame. And then they no longer can talk to you. Can you see? So this is also, we are talking about different degree of maturity. So what we have to do, we have to develop management skill, right? Conflict management skill. And what's that? It's the ability to intervene in a conflict that prevent it from escalating into a formal dispute. So there are this informal, this dispute. And so developing this skill, the skill to reduce the conflict to the level whereby it is least damaging. It means that this big problem and that we must reduce it to the smaller problem and smaller still. And there's something that we can handle, that it will not become a volcano and explode. So the proficiency to resolve the conflict by facilitating a cordial interpersonal relationship between parties. So that is also another description of what conflict management skill is all about. So let's talk about different ways of managing conflicts. Yeah. So here is a conflict, is a table here, the four square. So you can see that in the purple square is that I win, you win. So this is the win-win case. Then you have the lose-win. I lose, but you win. Can you see? And then this is the win-lose one. Means I win, you lose, the green one. And then for the other one, the red one, it is I lose, you lose. So once you understand this, is that in conflict management, this kind of idea would always come. Opposing idea is that, am I going to win this argument? Am I going to win in this conflict? And this normally would come from people who are self-focused, means that my idea is most important and that I must win. But sometimes in losing, you can win. So that when you lose, you may not lose a very great principle, but just certain inconveniences. All right. You may lose some comfort, you may lose some finance, but it will bring cohesion and it will bring unity to that group. So you might have to learn when to win and when to lose. So this is conflict management approaches by Kenneth Thomas and Rev Kilman. And many of you might have learned this called the Thomas Kilman approach. Yeah. So here you have competing, which is a win-lose situation. Accommodating is a lose-win, means that I lose, you win. Avoiding is both losing. Compromising is half lose, half win. And collaborating will be win-win. So we are going to go a little bit in depth into this so that we have the means to handle future conflicts. Now, so you have this Thomas Kilman conflict model. And so I'm going to go through them one by one. Now, you look to the left, extreme left, that arrow. You know, the arrow say assertiveness. That's assertiveness. So one part is high and then low. Then the lower bar say cooperativeness. Okay, it means they're able to collaborate, cooperate. So here low and high. And so we will be looking at this chart further. Now, first thing I want to talk to you about is this way in which we manage, okay? We manage conflict. The first one is normally called competing, which comes from means that I want my own view to be used. So focus on getting your perspective accepted. Then you assert your viewpoint at the potential expense of the opposing party, so that you don't care about the other person. I don't care about your opinion. Mine got to be done. It can be useful when achieving one's objective outweighs one's concern for the relationship. But in this kind of approach, you normally will create a certain degree of unhappiness because the other side got nothing to say, especially when you are a senior pastor like I am. All right. I can come to a department and be very assertive and I say, I want this done. Now, sometimes I've done that. All right. Like, you know, if I suggest certain things and I'm seeing that they are going away from the goal and away from the purpose of the church and they are running really off tangent, then I have to step in and say, look, get back. Now, when do you use that? You use that on groups that are not very mature. Like, for example, the youth, the young people, they might not have the maturity, all right? And then they might be still playful and they do not know how to reach an objective or reach a goal. And therefore, you have to use what we call task orientation. And so this is task orientation basically is competing. Means that I am going to put my idea over yours. And so you are right and your opponents are wrong. And so there is one way, my way. The solution that you have is yours. Can you see? Now, this way you might get things done very fast, but you can create a lot of unhappiness. Now, sometimes, now this has always been for years, have always been my preferred style. But, in later years, I began to learn that it's not the best style. It's not the best approach. Okay. I've learned how to cooperate with others. And so can you see the lighted area, the white that's competing? And so you can see, right, you, them, which means that you win, they lose, and focus on getting your perspective accepted. So this is high on you, okay, and very low on them. So the cooperativeness is very, very low. All right, let's talk about avoiding. Avoiding, you can see the two thumbs is down, thumbs down, yeah? Means that is negative. Now take a step back from the conflict and let it play out. Now sometimes we have to take a step back to let it play out, but not all the time. Avoid or postpone conflict by ignoring it, changing the subject. Where it means that when every time in the board, they'll bring up the issue and then we refuse to address it, we change the topic. Or in a discussion or negotiation, a particular sore point is being brought up, we avoid it. So that's called avoiding. So avoidance can be useful as a temporary measure to buy time. You avoid it because you need to think through, you avoid it because you need to buy time, or you avoid it because there would be certain procedure need to be done before that idea would be holistic and complete. So you avoid it, you don't want to bring it up until later time. But that is not really avoiding, right? That is called, you just put it KIV, may keep in view for a while until later when it's fully functional, then you are able to bring up and present it. Okay. So it could be an expedient means of dealing with very minor or non-recurring conflict. For example, if you see certain things that are not right, but it is very minor, very minor. Or like, for example, maybe they have put the cups in the wrong place, or some staff, after they left the office and they have not washed their cups. And so cockroaches would come and all that. And so you might, and you know that the custodian of that place most probably would complain, okay? And so she will come into your office to complain and say that so-and-so never washed the cup last night. And so this morning, all the roaches, they were dead. But you might not want to address it, openly. And so you might even not want to talk to the person because maybe you realize that the person was just too tired and forgot and just left for home. But usually the person would wash the cup. So you just avoid it and then that's it. It's a very minor issue. Now, in more severe cases, conflict avoidance can involve severing a relationship or leaving a group. So we have to be very careful, and then we need to communicate, even though it can be very nasty, it can be something that we don't like, but we need to face the truth here. You see, this is something that most of us who are Christian, we like to give it to God and say, Lord, I surrender this problem to you. And so if I ignore the problem, it will go away. Then if I confront the problem, I may hurt someone's feeling, you see? And then why bother? My intervention will not change anything, especially those, who may not have the authority and the power to change things. At one time, I was in Bible school and I realized that the Filipino workers in the Bible school, they were not paid fairly because during that time, this Aquino was murdered. He was killed. And that was the time of Marcos, President Marcos. And I was attending a Bible school in the Philippines. And we got these American lecturers who come over to teach us. And then I realized that all these Filipino workers in the church, they already have sums of money who came from US in US dollars. But during Aquino, that assassination, the Filipino, the peso dropped by half overnight, just dropped by half. And so when it comes to payday, the manager, he kept the extra money for the school and he paid the workers in peso, which is half the value. And so when I learned about it, because one of the workers was my co-pastor, because at that time when you were a student, you need to co-pastor with a veteran pastor. That veteran pastor was also a custodian, a worker in the church. And so the food prices have all gone up, rent have all gone up, but the school paid them that amount. And so when I went to talk to the manager, and he was very upset with me because he said, it's none of your business. And I told him, it's my business because you are in Asia, you are here to train us, and you cannot be unfair. And so it went into a conflict. And I realized that I had no power to solve it. So I wrote a 9-page complaint to the president. And thank God the new president who came took it into his hand and began to, he actually reprimanded the manager and he wanted all this extra money, all right, that had been kept for the school to be paid to the workers. And so how did I cause that change? I knew that as a student, I had no power to. So I borrowed power. I went up, instead of direct conflict with the manager, I went up to the president, and the president was a man of justice and a man of integrity. He saw that and he said, no, that's wrong. The money already came for the workers. We got to pay the workers. And he told me that he was so angry. He said that, Albert, I've never been so angry in my life. So that's how you handle conflict when you don't have power. All right, so you can see the avoiding is that lower left-hand side there. You can see everything is low, all right? So you and them both low, and then you take a step back from the conflict and let it play out. So that's called avoiding. Accommodating is accept the perspective of the other party to call a truth, which means that you look at you are thumbs down, and the other side is thumbs up. Means that they got the advantage, but you got the disadvantage. So you are losing and they are winning. Yeah. So surrender one's own needs and wishes to accommodate the other party. That's called accommodating. It's easier and less stressful to give in to the opposing party. And they will like you better because you are very agreeable. So sometimes I will use this approach. All right, I use this approach. And even though I do not agree fully to the standard of the other party, and because I know that that person is not of that standard yet, and so before I can push him up to a higher standard, I would accept his standard. All right, this is called accommodating. Instead of, chiding him and then ask him to push it up to the higher standard, which he could not reach, right? So I have to train him further. Now, his attitude was good, but he lacked skill, and skill takes time. And therefore, we have to slowly build up. It's just like you train a preacher. You don't expect this young man to be able to preach like you. So he preached a little bit substandard, right? But you must allow him to preach. You must give him the platform to preach. The more he preaches, and the better he would become. So this is what we mean by, giving way to the other person. So hopefully that in the future, the other party might give in to your ideas. So in this kind of game is called give and take. Give and take, right? I now give you, and hopefully you can give me back. So it is on the lower right hand. Okay, can you see? It is high on cooperativeness, means cooperation, but very low on assertiveness, means that I do not be assertive. I do not assert my own idea. I do not insist. So accept the perspective of the other party to call a truth. So sometimes this way might work. All right, let's look at compromising. You can see that it is half-half, right? Means that you win some and you lose some, and you win some and lose some for both parties. Means that we compromise. Means that both of us do not get what we want, but at least get half of what we want. So reach a consensus that is acceptable to all. And sometimes in this kind of a situation, this agreement usually come when you have somebody to be there to arbitrate for you, right? So you bring up the problem in the open, and the third party is present, and he's the one who say, why don't you give in a little bit here? He give in a little bit there, then we have a compromise. So this seems like a fair approach, or else neither parties will get will not get anything from the conflict. There's a mistake here. Will not get anything from the conflict. Okay, so sometimes we do need to compromise, especially when you find that in Elijah, we do the training, right? When we were doing training for the Methodist Church, and they said that, all right, you can teach us healing, but please do not speak in tongue. And so we didn't speak in tongue. We just did healing. We taught them healing. And throughout the worship, we didn't, say a word of tongue. We might be praying in tongues in the toilet or praying in tongues somewhere else, but we would not, pray in tongues that is in the church, because we agree with the pastors. And so sometimes we have to compromise. But some, very staunch Pentecost, the Pentecostal will say, no, we have to pray in tongues. We have to raise our hands and all that. No, we didn't have to. And so we actually taught the Anglicans, we taught the Methodists, we even taught a group called the Conservative Baptists, and then we taught the Brethren Church, and so on and so forth, the Presbyterian Church. Yeah, so because we were willing to compromise and say that, okay, when we worship, we are not going to raise our hand, we are not going to, because it's your church. We come to you, we respect you, and you have this request, we honor you. It's not that we don't want to, but it is your request, it's your area, it's your place. And so this is a matter of maturity and understanding. So the aim of conflict resolution is to reach an agreement, and most often this means compromise. And you may give up something that you do not really need so as to receive what you need. So you can see half win, half lose, yeah? And so that's in the center. You can see reach a consensus that is acceptable to all, right? That is in the center. Now, this is the good one. Can you see the two thumbs up there, both green in color? This collaborating. Now, this is something that we want to try to achieve in every negotiation, but it may not happen. But we come together to develop a mutually beneficial solution. We find a solution that works for both parties. So using the intensive listening approach, you might be able to understand the perspective of your opponent. So what we are advocating later on, we find that listening is more important than talking. And you'll be surprised, the power of listening is more convincing. When people realize that you understand them, you appreciate them, you listen to them, they tend to want to give in. But every time they say one word and you will throw in 10 words, then they say that this guy, he's not listening to me. And so they will also put up a wall and they will resist you, right? So once you find a common ground, then the two opposing parties can collaborate. This common ground, yeah. So while the Thomas Kilmann Greed views, right, collaboration as the only win-win solution to conflict, collaboration can also be time-intensive. So this might be very good, but it can be very time-intensive because you want to take time to find common ground, and inappropriate when there is not enough trust. And so why the other approaches happen is because not enough trust and not enough respect or communication among the participants for the collaboration to occur. So there are a few factors here that you really need. Means that I really need to trust the opponent. I really need to trust the person opposite me. And if I understand him and if I listen to him carefully, and most probably I can build up trust. And then, of course, from the feedback of others, so being objective, you listen to what the others talk about him and say, this is a man of integrity. This is an honest man. And therefore, these are people, honest people and people of integrity whom we can really collaborate. And this is how win-win case. But when somebody comes in and let's say, for example, that person will tear down you, then there's distrust. Then you will find out that a lot of time you may have to take time to earn the trust. So it is on the top right-hand corner, and you can see is both win-win case, win-win case. So come together to develop a mutually beneficial solution, win-win case. So this is about the Thomas Kilmann conflict model, and that you can of course go online and study more about this, but all this method can be used. There's no right or wrong. Sometimes you may have to use avoiding, right? Especially when the other party is not ready to communicate, and you may have to avoid for a while. Or your plan may not be fully established yet, and so you may want to avoid. So look through all this again, and then see for yourself, and maybe you can run through this video again and see which area you can improve. Let's talk about the level of conflict. There's the informal and the formal. And so you find that informal will be more often handled quickly, less noticeable by others, and quick resolution between conflicting parties. Okay, formal need more attention, more skill necessary to resolve or understand what the pastor, the elders, the church workers, or members, or your spouse, or your family members have heard or seen. So let's go and see what is really this. Hang on, let me get back to this. This informal, right? Which means that when you have like a brief disruption, and then there is a brief conflict, then you can solve it straight away. But when it's a major conflict, then you need to call for a meeting, and you need to get everybody involved, and then you need to find an answer to the problem. I think later I shall put more on it. Okay, how to prevent conflict? Frequent meeting of your team. Communication again. Allow your team to express openly, which means that in this brainstorming, we have this brainstorming rule here. Like in a meeting, when we ask for brainstorm, means that everybody must be able to say whatever he wants to say without being shut down. And all you need to do is write down everything everybody says. For example, somebody might say that, okay, in order for the church to grow, we must invite Mickey Mouse to come. Now, many of us will say, oh, that is a stupid idea, right? No, you write down. So and so say, invite Mickey Mouse to come. Yeah. So that that person is not being shut down and that he can continue to give his ideas. So allow the team to express openly. And then make sure that you share your objective. Everybody knows where we are going. Like in FaithLine, we want to put across, all right, that we want to teach everybody the two-hand punch. Means that when you come in, the two-hand punch. And I want all my leaders to understand this two-hand punch. But some of my leaders are quite resistant. They don't want to talk about a two-hand punch. What are this two-hand punch thing, right? It is to heal the sick and cast out evil spirit. That's one punch, and then to preach the gospel. Next punch. Means that we want to train our people, all our people, to be able to cast out demon, to heal the sick, and then the other one is that to preach the gospel. But some of my leaders are quite stubborn because they have their own ideas, they have their own agenda, and so how do I encourage them? How do I speak to them? Every time, frequent meeting with the team. So in order to prevent conflict, we must keep sharing the objective and keep sharing, the idea that God gave you. And then for those who work with you, you have to give them clear and detailed job description. And then also to distribute the task fairly and never to criticize team members publicly. I have this rule whereby I would talk to the person one-on-one, okay, one-on-one. Whether I'm going to praise the person or whether I am going to reprimand the person, it'll be one-on-one. And then it will be 1 minute, that's it. And there won't be any repetition because I don't want to be historical about it. So 1 minute, I will tell you, you are doing a good job. Or 1 minute, I will tell you, this is not a good job, all right? And I expect this change. Unless you repeat the mistake, then the same reprimand will come, okay? So the reprimand will always come when a mistake is made, so that you know that this is not the way to run things. And then you always must be fair and just with your team, because the people who serve with you, right, they always look for fairness and see how you treat each other. If you have a favorite person in that team and then you are treating that person better than the rest, and then you find that people will sense this unfairness. And they might be working just as hard, but that person got praise, or that person, got all the accolade and all the honor. And then, of course, you have to be a role model. Now, all these are easily said, but quite difficult to achieve. Being a role model, which means that you almost have to be like Jesus. Yeah. And even Paul the Apostle, he wasn't like Jesus. He was quarreling with Barnabas. He was quarreling with Peter, right? Not really like Jesus yet. Okay. So key components in resolving conflict is great listening skill, all right, flexibility, willingness to change, agree to disagree. And we are going to go through this here, all right, listening skill. Meaning that when you talk to people, you don't look away. You don't look away. You maintain the contact in the eye. You look. But in the other course that I taught on homiletics, right? I actually taught people how to talk to each other. In communication, you always look at the face as a triangle, means the eye and down the cheek and to the tip of the chin and then back to the eye. So that you're not staring in the eye, but you're looking around the face. And then do not interrupt and let the opposing party finish. Now, sometimes that is my problem, that I tend to want to interrupt. And so I have to hold back and have some self-control to let the person finish. You know why you interrupt? Because you predict what the person going to say. You already know what the person will say, right? So you predict. But it's best that you listen, because there might be a twist. The person may not be saying what you think that he will say. So it's best to be quiet and listen. And your good posture is always maintain a the threatening position. Of course, you cannot talk to the person and then you put your hand on your waist, like this akimbo, yeah, and or you fold up your arm like that. Then the person will say that he's being hostile. So the best way to talk to a person is side by side, not opposite, but side by side. Sit on the sofa and talk. Yeah, sit on a bench and talk. No. Gently rehearse the situation that you might become emotional about. So what you have to be careful is that there are certain key factors in your life that will cause you to burst in emotion. They make you very angry. And so you got to be careful, all right? That gently rehearse it in your mind, and then that person is bringing up that kind of a thing, a topic that you really don't like and you really want to scold him. Hold your horses. Hold your horses. So listening skill. Number 2 is flexibility. Is be able to adjust to any situation. Now, sometimes you find that it may not be that easy. So do not try to handle the situation alone. So go with a neutral party if you have to. Because when you go and negotiate, it depends on where you go. If you go to a neutral place, it's okay. But if you go to the person's office, then it's a different environment. In his office, he is king. And so there might be a particular tension. So when you get a neutral person to come in, he is able to diffuse it for you. So understand that you are not going to please everyone. Agree to disagree. This is a two-way street, but the one with the authority has the final say. So in any of the negotiation, right, you can talk and talk and talk, but ultimately the one with the authority will be the one who say, yes, I agree with this, or I agree with that, or I agree with the compromise. Yeah, so that person will have the say. So in the church, I happen to be the person where the buck stopped, on my desk, so that all the pastors can discuss about so many things, but ultimately you got to come to my desk and now I got to say yes or no, all right? But I try to give all the pastors liberty and freedom to do what they can do best. But let's say if certain result is not coming, and then I realize that that might be a particular weakness of that pastor, and then I have to take that, the item or the project from that pastor and hand to another pastor who can do it. And sometimes it's very tough because it would offend that pastor, and it will cause the pastor maybe one day this will fester up into something of a full-fledged disagreement, and then it becomes a conflict. So that's why I have to deal with this nip it at the bud. All right, number 3 is willingness to change. Means get the call right and go with your teammate. Means understand the purpose of the meeting, understand what you are there for. So if change is necessary, make the necessary changes. All right, understand the psychology of your fellow workers and what motivates them. Communicate with them often, know your co-workers well, because the conflict is always with people who work close to you. And therefore, once you understand them, you know their background, their culture, and how they function, and then you can make changes in yourself so that you can adapt and then you can flow with them. Or you can flow in such a way by which you can bring them up to a higher heights so that they can achieve greater things. Especially when you are a servant leader, you're put in charge of a home cell, or put in charge of a department or a ministry. And therefore, this is to be expected. Conflict is to be expected, but managing it is also to be expected. So there must be a willingness to change. Don't say, I don't care, for the last 50 years, I'm like that, and I'm going to stay like that. No. Number 4 is diffusing the situation. This is that informal conflict that we talk about. Remember, just now we talked about that informal, which means that normal work activities continue. This informal means that you don't have to stop work and call for a meeting. Like in this case, the 3 of them, they were doing something, and right there, the leader here is bringing like, a adjustment to the attitude or whatever. But use visual acknowledgement with fellow workers, which means that sometimes non-verbal action like wait, later, go on, and so on, and then use direct eye. The eye, very important. You connect with your co-workers, and he should be able to read what you want. Right? Like if he's doing something wrong, and all you need to do is look at the person, and then the person will say, oh, I've done something wrong. I'm going to stop doing it. I'm going to change. All right. So now my mother was very good at that. My mother never needed to shout at us. She had only one of 2 ways. One way is the stare. Oh, we children were very afraid of her stare. The very moment she stared at us intensely, oh, we shiver. Now, if that stare failed, there's no other word. Is the rotan would come, the cane would come, or anything nearby. She'll grab something and she'll hit you. So it's the stare and the reprimand. Yeah. So, but in this kind of a case, right, normal work and minor thing, just look and say, and then solve it. You can also use short verbal explanation. I hear you, thanks, I see what you meant, right? For example, you are the junior and your superior is asking you, your boss is telling you that, he stare, and then you can say, I hear you, yeah? Or if you have a different approach, then you tell him, right? So most of us must know the situation on the ground. Like for example, in the army, we actually trust the officer in the front line, right? We do not let the people, the top brass at the back control everything. When the officer is in the front line, he can actually disobey to do that task. It means disobey the instruction because the situation had changed, and then he got to take over and then devise his own plan. So this is the way to diffuse the problem. Number 5 is use the formal conflict. Okay, so work activities may need to stop. All right, and then help your fellow workers with positive information. Let the leader make the final decision. So now this is a real meeting now, right? Stop work, we go into the conference room and we are going to meet, or we go to one corner and we are going to trash it out. So this is a formal conflict. And then diffuse the situation. Do not abuse it. The purpose is to fix the problem, not to fix the blame. So get everyone to calm down if possible. And once again, the eyes, very important. Contact, yeah? And then make sure that you are not in the fighting posture. Make sure that it's a non-confrontational posture. Means don't put your hand on your waist, don't put your hand in your pocket, or fold your arm. All these are actually confrontational posture. So fix the problem, do not fix the blame. So conflict resolution is what? Before you go and resolve it, what you need to do is get into the right frame of mind, okay? And send positive body language, which means that you must be smiling, you must not be too tense, and you must not clench your fists. Imagine when you go into a meeting and both fists are being clenched like that. Then people know that you come fighting, yeah? And understand that, especially in the church, the opposing party is a brother or a sister in Christ, and he or she deserves your respect. So focus upon the issue. If let's say the problem is with a certain particular activity in the church that need to be resolved, certain kind of a problem need to be resolved, then focus upon it. Yeah, remain humble at all times. Then what you do is that arrange the best time and ideal place for both opposing parties to meet and discuss about the conflict. Sometimes it's this way. The workplace may not be a good place. And then we say, okay, let's meet in another place. Let's have lunch or let's have dinner, and then we can talk it out. Okay? We can set some ground rules and meet and talk it out, right? Ground rules can be that we don't bang table, we don't shout, we don't throw plates at one another, and so on. You might want to set various kind of ground rules depending on who the people you are facing with. Now, do not bring this along. Number one is your desire to win, your desire to punish or control. Now, sometimes between husband and wife, that can happen. I'm going to come into this negotiation, I'm going to punish her. I'm going to make her feel so bad, and I'm going to control her. You see, that's already wrong. So don't bring that. Then don't bring your assumption that this negotiation will not work. Means that you go in already negative. She will not listen, and the tendency to think only in contrasting colors, means just black and white, just black and white. There are many, many grays area. So be willing to touch on all the grays. And then also do not have the determination to be always right. Oh, I'm right, they are wrong. Once you have this kind of attitude, you find that it will be a problem to begin with. What you must bring along? Total humility, a willingness to learn from your opponents, be willing to recognize your weaknesses or mistake. Means that you are going to do the intrapersonal, the communication, and check yourself. Where have you gone wrong? Check what is the contribution to the problem. Oftentimes in the negotiation, right, you'll be surprised that when you start to explore the source of the problem and the reason why the problem remains, sometimes the responsibility may point at you. The hands of responsibility may point at you and say, you are the source of the problem. Oftentimes, being the senior pastor, I am the bottleneck, all right? Which means that a lot of things are not being done because I have not given authority to the other pastors. I'm not given the appropriate authority to the other workers. And so everything they have to come and ask me. And sometimes I do not check the WhatsApp, sometimes I do not check, the communication tools. Then what happened here? I miss. And I didn't approve, and then they get so upset, you're supposed to approve on Wednesday, and now it's already Thursday, and you have not even looked at it. Can you see? So that can be my so this problem, how do you solve it? You be humble, and you might want to delegate and say that, okay, for this thing you can go ahead without asking me. For that thing you can go ahead without asking me, and so on and so forth. Okay. So leading with empathy. So this is called cognitive empathy, is that whenever you talk to the person and the person is having a crisis and there's a conflict going on, if I were to be in his position, what would I be thinking right now? So that's cognitive. Then emotional empathy will be being in his the position would make me feel bad. So it is that I would think like he thinks, and then I would feel like he feels. And so that I would not judge him too harshly. So understanding the person's situation should turn into compassion and action. Okay? You are appreciating his point of view and engaging in a healthy discussion that builds to a better answer. Okay, so this is what empathy is all about. It's love and kindness and understanding, and it's Christian love, it's agape love. Sometimes the person may not deserve it, but then you are willing to put your hand on his shoulder and say, all right, I understand where you are going, what you are going through. Though there might be some adjustment needed, but I do understand. You are considering his perspective and making a new recommendation that helps achieve greater success. So you are thinking for him. And people may not remember what you say, but they will remember how you make them feel. That at the end of the day, the person will be thankful that you give them a chance, that you give grace and you give mercy. And that you are unwilling to cast them off just because of some mistake. But then you say, let's work together. So this is the ministry of reconciliation. And to conclude, let me share this story with you from Matthew 5. Therefore, if you are offering your gift at the altar, then remember your brother or sister has something against you. Leave your gift there in front of the altar. First, go and be reconciled to them, and then come and offer your gift. So this is what the Lord says here, is that, yes, you want to come and give God gift is good thing, is a good thing, but he wants the horizontal relationship to be established. The vertical relationship will be meaningless if we do not establish the horizontal one. And so here is talking about your brother or your sister. It's not talking about, that you go out there and try to get the Pharisees to come along with you. They will not. It's talking about the fellow Christians. If your brother or sister sin against you, go and point out their fault just between the two of you. If they listen to you, you have won them over. See? So means that just the two of you. And then if your brother or your sister listen, then great, won them over. But if they will not listen, take one or two others along, so that every matter may be established by the testimony of two or three witnesses. So now here is talking about within church context. And we have done that. We have done that. There was one brother who sinned and he committed adultery. And so we talked to him, but he was not very receptive. And then we got the leadership to talk to him. And later on, he was supposed to report to one of the pastors, to show that he had repented, but then he chose to leave the church. Yeah. So, and this is what here in Matthew 17 says, that if they still refuse to listen, tell it to the church. Okay. And if they refuse to listen even to the church, like this man, all right, he refused to listen to the church, all right, treat them as you would a pagan or a tax collector. So which means this means that treat the person like a non-Christian, because he will not submit to the authority even of the church. Means that that person got nobody. Or he can say, I submit to God, but no, the Lord say you can put your gift there, all right, and then you got to, if somebody is coming to reconcile with you and you refuse to, then what happened here is that go to the church. First, you bring someone there, And then later on, you bring the church elders and the church pastors. And if they refuse to listen to the pastor, then that's it. They are not even considered Christian. Okay, so this is how we handle it in the church. So what have we learned? We learned that conflict is a biblical reality, and we learned that conflict is unavoidable as long as you're alive here on earth. But conflict is not unspiritual if you know how to handle it in a godly way, right? Then we also discuss about stages of conflict, types of conflict. We also talk about functional and dysfunctional conflict, and Christian conflict management, and how we develop conflict management skill. All right. That's all I have to say for this evening, and I trust that this lesson will be helpful to you. So God bless you.